The Vikings have to address 3 starters on offense. That's wide receiver, center, and right guard. On the defensive side of the ball, 5 starters. That's defensive line, edge, inside linebacker, nickel, and safety. And if you lose Dalvin Tomlinson, it jumps to 6 on defense. All in all, 8 to 9 starters you have to address this offseason if you're the Vikings. And best case scenario, if you're able to trade down from pick 23 to remain in the first round while also getting a second round pick, best case scenario, the Vikings can get 4 starters through their 2023 draft class, which makes free agency super important. And with the Vikings being voted #1 in player team report cards, that's a great selling point in negotiations. And I talked about this before. The Vikings can create $28 million in cap space for immediate use. That's before any post-June 1st cuts are made. And that's also as long as they can be done with the old act of keeping players for the sake of nostalgia. The more positions of need that you can eliminate before the draft, the better off that you are. So let's take a look at some free agent options for the Vikings. At defensive line, the only player that I would consider is Sheldon Rankins, who last played for the Jets. As a 4-3 defensive tackle, Rankins had 3 sacks, 4 TFLs, 7 quarterback hits, a forced fumble, and 43 tackles in 2022. I think he can be a force regardless of the base defense. Market value projected at $7.3 million per year. Honorable mention here, I'm going to say Javon Hargrave, and I say honorable mention because he's going to break the bank. He's going to be too rich for the Vikings' blood, so he's out. And that edge rusher, I'm going to put that in the draft bank. If you were to scan the edge rushing free agents out there, the only player that might be worth raising hell about is Brandon Graham, but the only thing is he'll be 35 soon, and he strikes me as a guy that would only play for Philadelphia. At inside linebacker, 2 guys that stick out. Tremaine Edmonds from Buffalo last year had 102 tackles, 6 TFLs, 7 pass deflections. He's a stud. He'll be 25 next season, and I'm guessing that there's going to be a bidding war for him. He's the cream of the crop at his position in free agency. Estimated market value, according to Spotrac.com, $11 million per year. Now, the second option that I consider is Anthony Walker Jr. from Cleveland. His previous 4 years from 2018 to 2021 averaged 109 tackles a season. He's a machine, and he's got a projected market value of $4.4 million per year. The only reason it's not on par with Tremaine Edmonds is because last year, 2022, he played in just 3 games before suffering a torn quad tendon, out for the year. Assuming that health is no longer an issue, this would be a great get for Minnesota because, aside from the production, Anthony Walker Jr. would bring some much-needed on-field leadership. Now, as far as slot corner, I feel like the Vikings, you have 2 options here. If it were me running the show anyway, let Cam Bynum compete for the job or address it in the draft because if you want to entertain free agency, the only realistic option I see for the Vikings is Nick Needham from the Miami Dolphins. He's 26 years old. Last year, not bad, allowing a 53% completion rate, but he missed 11 games suffering a torn Achilles. And for me, a cornerback recovering from a torn Achilles, I just can't take that risk. At safety, Jesse Bates is going to be too expensive, as well as Jordan Poyer. I could maybe be talked into Jimmy Ward. He has a projected market value of $7.6 million per year. If you can't get him, address it in the draft. Or I wouldn't mind giving Josh Metellus a shot at the job. On offense, wide receiver, I talked Jacoby Myers plenty. I would rather get a receiver in the draft and maybe do free agency as an emergency. But at center, there are 2 players that I hope the Vikings are seriously considering. You've got Connor McGovern, who is really good from the Jets, or Ethan Pochich from the Cleveland Browns, who I think is solid. Now, McGovern, the better player, 2 years older than Pochich. Right now, McGovern is 29, Pochich 27. And there's a vast difference in terms of projected market value. McGovern, $12.5 million estimated per year. Ethan Pochich, $7.2 million. And at right guard, it's no secret. There's only one player that I'm looking at, Isaac Seumalo of the Philadelphia Eagles, according to Spotrac. He should command $12.1 million per year. Now, as far as what I would do in free agency, the idea of finally having a respectable offensive line is just too big for me to pass up. So I would sign, assuming these numbers are rock solid, I would sign Ethan Pochich and Isaac Seumalo. Because think about this. Along with your 2 great offensive tackles, if you can upgrade 2/3 of your interior offensive line for $19 million, oh my God, you're set. Plus, if possible, Anthony Walker Jr. at $4.4 million, I would make that happen as well. Now, these raw numbers, they're not going to reflect the exact cap hits, but for the sake of discussion here, you may have to squeeze out a few more contracts such as Nick Muse or Luigi Villain in order to sign your draft picks. But Pochich, Sayamalu, and if possible, Anthony Walker Jr., those are my free agent targets for the Minnesota Vikings. That's 3 starters right there. And ideally, if you can take care of a position in-house, Josh Metellus at safety, or Cam Bynum at nickel, that brings you up to 4. At least one of those positions anyway. And if Dalvin Tomlinson returns, that $7.5 million dead cap hit is no longer dead because he's here. So the remaining 4 starting positions you can take care of in the draft. Joe Matilla says, Kirk to Frisco makes sense, and Kirk would walk into the exact situation he needs to prove all his naysayers wrong. Minnesota needs a complete tequila on defense, and the O-line still is a disaster from guard to guard. I will say, in Kirk's defense, even though I'm completely done with him in Minnesota, I talk about how everything needs to be right for him. If he goes to San Francisco, he can legit win a title. Everything over there is right. They are exactly what Mike Zimmer wanted the Vikings to be. Great defense. Run the football. And if you remember those 2019 playoffs, NFC Championship game, Niners versus Packers, Jimmy G, if I'm not mistaken, he threw the ball just 8 times. All they did was run the football. And in that Super Bowl against the Chiefs, Kirk Cousins would have completed that pass late in the 4th quarter to Emmanuel Sanders, and I think the Niners would have won the title. So it makes sense for Kirk Cousins to go to San Francisco, especially because they've been so close so many times. Kai Williams says, if we trade Kirk, then we got to blow the whole team up. No, we don't. Really? Kirk Cousins, he's that important to this team? No, he's not. So, practically the defense has been blown up already. So on offense, we have to let go of Christian Darrisaw. We have to start over at left tackle, Brian O'Neill at right tackle. If anything, if we were to lose Justin Jefferson, then I would agree with you. But Kirk Cousins? Nah, man. And lastly, Derek L. says, if I were the 49ers, I might tap Derek Carr first. I don't know if I agree with that because, well, for 2 reasons. We know that Kyle Shanahan loves Kirk Cousins. We don't necessarily know how he feels about Derek Carr. And furthermore, worst case, if you trade for Kirk, it's just a 1-year rental for a $17.5 million cap hit for 2023 if you're San Francisco. Minnesota, they'd be responsible for the other $18.5 million. Worst case, it's a 1-year rental. If it doesn't work out, you wash your hands of it. Derek Carr, if you sign him in free agency, you have to commit to this dude to a multi-year deal. I'm telling you right now, the idea of Kirk getting traded to San Francisco, I'm going to be on this all off season long. It ain't over till it's over.